Well, results in the elections may be released as early as tonight. Yesterday, observers from the EU mission and the Southern African bloc SADC heavily criticised the Zimbabwe Election Commission. According to the last results, the governing party ZANU-PF had the most seats in parliament, and the CCC, or Citizens Coalition for Change, had about half of what ZANU-PF had put on the board. Well, the results of the presidential race, primarily between the incumbent Emmerson Mnangagwa and the CCC's Nelson Chamisa, have yet to be released. This week, that dominated the news, as well as the BRICS, of course. Let's speak to Khayelihle Khumalo, our correspondent who was in Harare. You flew in today from Zimbabwe. We were talking about the tensions yesterday. Let's start with this spokesperson for the CCC. The fact that somebody is like that is being arrested or police are attempting to arrest him at a press conference will surely add to the narrative that the ZANU-PF party is a bit paranoid right now.
Well, very much so, Francis, especially because when you go back to the Observer Mission's report, one of the grave concerns that they raised had to be the issue of freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly in Zimbabwe, where they said for the opposition parties, those rights might have been curtailed. So this is a very clear-cut example where you have this particular media briefing, where also, the freedom of expression, once again, where the observers were saying the media, was very much biased towards, ZANU-PF, especially in Zimbabwe, but also pointing to this, the temperatures that are rising in Zimbabwe as everybody's waiting with bated breath for the official announcement of the results, especially for the presidential results, because that's always a main issue. It's always a focal point, as much as you do have the local authorities and the MPs, but the priority is always just around the presidential results.
Just staying with the spokesperson, ZANU-PF said there's a case from 2020, but look at the timing. We're now in 2023, but do we know how big that case is? I don't know.
It's quite mysterious because when you look at the police's statement, so they talk about this incitement of violence, and also they talk about all kinds of things, but also it's so vague, especially because, when you look at the ZANU-PF yesterday, they had an opportunity where they had a media briefing, everything was right smooth in their headquarters, and then you look at this particular case. But also you've had also from the CCC, where they've denounced this particular incident. In fact, they say these two particular individuals who stormed their press briefing are actually police officials. So they're really just tarnishing the image of some of the police in Zimbabwe who really work so hard in terms of protecting the nation and doing all sorts of things. But also, Francis, something that's rather very disappointing as well. A lot of people are looking forward to the statement by President Mnangagwa, but we do understand that has been postponed as to for how long. There's no indication from the State House, especially because when he voted in his constituency, he made it very clear that the issue of peace is very important for Zimbabwe. But at this particular point in time, the tension is rising in his country.
All right, and we did hear from his party yesterday, mainly in response to the election observers, saying the head of the SADC mission is biased. This is the first time SADC has spoken out very strongly against polls in Zimbabwe. Has the Zimbabwe Election Commission spoken at all? Because they are the ones receiving the huge criticism.
The information from ZAC has not really been forthcoming, but what we do know is that there was a tweet that they had where they said they are really focusing on the task at hand. They don't want to be drawn to anything whatsoever. So they say their focus at this point is about collation, counting, making sure that the verification, everything is just, above board. But also something that the ZAC commissioner, in fact, the chairperson, Priscilla Chigumba, had really indicated prior to these elections. She made a commitment that they remain a very independent institution. They are not drawn or, they're not taking any particular stance, but also something that has always been just a major concern in Zimbabwe. We'll have to be these delays that we saw, where subsequently we saw the extension of the election, especially in the urban areas. And coincidentally, these are areas that are perceived to be the stronghold of the opposition parties. So it raises quite a number of questions. Why everything was very smooth? For example, predominantly in areas like around Midlands, in the rural areas, but in the urban areas, you had people sleeping in the polling stations, waiting to vote.
Sure. All right. Our reporter Khayelihle Khumalo, who has been on the ground and continues to follow the vote counting in Zimbabwe.